if you've been to a lot of my talks, which it looks like everybody on the attendee list is familiar to me, but this it's not geared really heavily towards mental health. It's more geared towards behavioral health, which is, there's some interplay between those two things, but this is looking more focused on behavior and overall wellness, and also with a direct correlation to some physical health. So you'll notice a little bit different angle on this one. It's not as long as my other one, so I think it usually takes about 40 to 45 minutes, so we'll have plenty of time. If you do come up with a question while we're going, I can't see anyone or the screen right now. I can only see my slides. So if you can just type it into the chat box or jot it down where you are so that you don't end up losing it, then we can just go through and answer any questions at the end. So my name is Helen Beaman. I have a master's of social work. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm currently your older adult behavioral health specialist. I cover Lynn and Benton County, sometimes Lincoln County, and I come to you today with a little over 20 years of experience. We are going to start by looking specifically about the relationship between cold weather and our heart, how cold weather really impacts it, what it does to the heart on a physical level. Then we'll look at dangers of cold weather and really looking at what's the criteria for hypothermia. When are we in trouble and how will we know? Then we will look at signs and symptoms of a heart attack. There is a nice infographic on each slide, and I break it up by biological sex. So there's a lot of shared signs and symptoms between men and women, but there are actually several additional signs and symptoms, particularly for women, and we don't talk about them a lot. So there will be a few on the men's slide, and then when we go to the next slide, you'll see there's actually a couple extra. And I don't think there are any men with us on the talk today, so we can focus on those a little bit more. And then we will conclude the talk by looking at some practical tips to navigate the cold winter months. Basically, how do we get through the cold winter months and stay safe, but also make the most of it, and end up, making sure that we're maintaining all of our, healthful behaviors that we normally do when we have a little bit more pleasant weather. You'll notice if you've been to a lot of my talks that, this isn't rocket science, so there's going to be some repetition with some of the recommendations that I make in other talks. All right. So I think we have at least one person that can't see the slides, so sometimes I will reference if there's a meaningful image or something like that, just for folks so they don't miss out. So this slide is really just starting to talk about an overview of that relationship between cold weather and our heart. So in the winter, cold weather is the most common health risk. In the winter, cold weather is the most common health risk. Like, it just seems weird to think about the cold temperature being a health risk, but it's true. And in the winter time, we actually see the peak of heart attacks. Okay, so the winter you can think of as kind of like heart attack season, which is not a season we want to be in. So this information isn't designed to scare you. It's just meant to build a little bit more awareness around this, because until I researched this topic to build this PowerPoint, I didn't really know how dangerous the cold weather could be for folks. So basically we see this correlation between the temperature dropping. Okay, so we have cold weather. For the valley folks, it also means that we have a ton of rain with cold weather, and every once in a while we'll get some ice and snow that we're really not equipped for because we don't deal with it very often. And then on top of that, we also have a lot of very common changes in human behavior due to that drop in temperature and other things like the holiday season and stuff like that. And we see this creating kind of the perfect storm of risk factors for cardiovascular problems. So this slide is kind of the most technical slide that I have, really. This is talking about the impact of the cold. And the best way to kind of understand this is looking at it as a mismatch between supply and demand. And supply and demand, we're talking about oxygen-rich blood and involving our heart muscle. So cold weather can and usually does decrease the supply of oxygen-rich blood to our heart muscle. And this is usually because it causes blood vessels to constrict or get smaller. And it can put us in situations that force our hearts to work harder. So this could be a situation where maybe we are just trying to stay warm. We've walked outside and our body is trying to maintain warmth or create warmth to keep us at a nice equilibrium. So that's going to be hard work for our hearts. It could also mean that we're outside, you know, hopefully not more than 2 weeks out of the year, but we might be outside shoveling or putting salt on some ice or something like that. As a result, our heart is demanding more of that oxygen-rich blood, and such a mismatch, okay, that smaller supply of oxygen to the heart in comparison to the greater demand for it sets us up potentially for a heart attack. So this next slide is talking about biological factors. So it describes some of the components of what we just talked about in greater detail. The first one is talking about the cold causing blood vessels to contract, so to get smaller. This inherently can raise blood pressure, and that can increase the risk of heart attack or stroke. Angina, or another word for chest pain, due to coronary heart disease can also increase or worsen in the winter when coronary arteries constrict in the cold. So if you already experience chest pain or angina due to coronary heart disease, you may notice it worsening. So it could just be more frequently, it could be greater intensity, things like that, due to you know, the effect of the cold on your arteries. And your heart has to work extra hard to maintain a healthy body temperature. And so I just recently moved to the coast. In the valley, we do get quite a bit of wind, but if you are in an area where it's really windy or it's just particularly windy that day, you need to be thinking about how much more quickly that wind can strip you of body heat. So just be aware of things like that. If it's cold, it's already going to be a difficult situation for you to maintain your body temperature. And as we get older, we do not do a very good job of thermoregulating, which is a fancy way of saying our body's ability to warm us up when we're colder than we should be, and or cool us down when we're hotter than we should be. So if you went to the Summer Sun and Fun talk that I do usually in June or July, it's referring to that too. And as we get older, it's just something that we have to work harder to do. So this slide is about implications specifically for the older adult population. So older adults typically, not everyone, but typically have less body fat and also that diminished ability to sense temperature, okay? On top of that, a diminished ability to thermoregulate. So not every body shape is the same, obviously, but generally as we age, we lose some of that body fat that can kind of insulate us towards dramatic temperature changes. And then on top of that, people with cardiovascular disease are going to be at an increased risk. So if you're an older adult and you have some sort of cardiovascular disease, you're going to be at higher risk. So it doesn't mean that something bad's going to happen. It just means that you need to be more aware, a little bit more cautious, make sure you're preparing if you're going to go outside or if you're going to do any extra hard work that might make your heart muscle work harder. This next slide is looking at what hypothermia is. So this is when our body temperature has fallen to below 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're usually around like 98, 99 degrees in general. And so this doesn't seem, you know, that much different, but you're technically hypothermic when you have dipped below that 95 degree mark. And a note about this is that it can happen very quickly. So we don't want to underestimate how quickly we can lose a couple degrees off of our temperature. So this could be like, you know, you're warm in your house, you've got the heat turned up, maybe it's, you know, 37, 45 degrees outside, it doesn't really matter, okay? It could happen very quickly either way, but let's say you're like, I'm just gonna pop out and get the mail. I'm not gonna get all bundled up to do that. It's just right at the end of the driveway or whatever. Especially adding in a cold breeze, and you could potentially lose that heat very, very quickly. So just know that it's a subtle change, but when we do become hypothermic, you know, it can be something that we need to watch out for. Obviously, if you come back in right away and warm up, it's going to be okay. But any kind of prolonged exposure to being that cold is not going to be good. This occurs when our body can't produce enough energy to keep the internal body temperature warm enough. So again, either our warmth has been stripped from us, and our bodies just can't keep up with the pace, basically. It can't crank out enough heat to get us back up to a healthy temperature. And just noting that hypothermia can be something that kills you. So again, just like with the summer talk, I just don't want people underestimating, being too hot or being too cold, because it's a very, very stressful event to your body and all your organs. So signs and symptoms to look for. So thinking about, signs and symptoms, signs are something that you can see. So if I'm looking at you and I see that you're shivering or hear that you have slurred speech, that's a sign. Symptom is generally something that we think of as something we experience, but another person might not be able to see that about us. So this can be helpful if you are with someone else and you notice some of these things happening. It can also be helpful for you to stay aware of for yourself to make sure that you're not getting too cold. And the other thing too is that whenever we look at signs and symptoms of anything, whether it's depression, anxiety, or hypothermia, we need to see these things occurring as a change from our normal functioning or our normal baseline. If you have always historically had a rather weak pulse, then we wouldn't necessarily say, oh, you have a weak pulse today and it's colder outside, so you might have hypothermia, okay? But if you noticed a grouping of these symptoms together and some of them are different from your normal functioning, that's when you would start to look at it as, okay, you're kind of showing multiple signs of hypothermia, and we want to make sure that we're paying attention to that. So an obvious one is shivering, okay? The next one is slurred speech. Breathing is going to become slow and shallow. Pulse will be weak. There could potentially be some mental confusion, drowsiness or fatigue, that low energy, and then loss of coordination and loss of consciousness. Okay, this is really, really relevant if you come up on someone and they're outside and they are unconscious, right? We want to act really, really quickly and call for emergency services, because we won't necessarily know what happened, but if they're outside in a cold temperature, no matter how well they're bundled up, we want to respond as this is a medical emergency. So other risk factors that can contribute to people being, a little bit more vulnerable to cardiovascular events in the wintertime. In general, most of us kind of go into what I like to call hibernation mode. I know we're not bears, but I know that when the weather gets cold, I really crave carbohydrates a lot more. I just want soup and bread bowls and comfort food. I want to be cozy and usually indoors. So in general, most of us become less active. Okay, it's a time where I can tell you I personally do let some of my exercise behavior slip a little bit. I say like it's too rainy, it's too cold, whatever the case may be. Poor sleep habits. So this can be a result of, maybe we're trying to do too many holiday events, hopefully via Zoom, but everybody is able to make their own choices. So if you're going out and still spending time with family and friends, or maybe you're staying up late, ordering Christmas presents or wrapping Christmas presents late at night, and you're thinking, well, I don't have to be anywhere, so it's fine. Or it can be contributed to the changes in light that we have, daylight savings time at the end of the year. I don't know about you, but I can tell you that for me, when it's dark at 4 p.m., like 10 o'clock at night, dark at 4 p.m., it really messes with my head. It messes with my behaviors and my choices. And so I'm more likely to be less active and want to go to sleep before it's even a reasonable time, just because we don't have that natural light later in the day like we're used to. Higher stress levels that can be associated with the end of the year. So, if you're not stressed about the holidays, that's awesome. You should probably come and do a panel discussion for my holiday stress talk. Most people just get stressed out around the holiday time. Sometimes just the end of the year, like people are trying to get a lot of things done before the new year starts. It can just be a stressful time of year for a lot of reasons. And that stress, it can feel like it's just emotional, but any kind of emotional stress or psychological stress is going to be felt to some degree as a physical stressor in your body. And then influenza. Okay, so in the fall and winter is when we see our peaks in the flu, and that is most certainly a stressor on our body. Strenuous activity. So in the valley, we don't get hit with it as much. You know, folks in Lebanon, you tend to get a little bit more ice and snow than other places in the valley. And so if you're out there trying to, you know, even put chains on your tires or shovel a walkway, anything like that, that's just strenuous activity for most of us. We don't have to do it very often. So something to be thinking about. And then excess alcohol can be another risk factor. So this can be for a number of reasons as well. Alcohol does have the ability to make us feel warmer. So some people will just choose to drink more alcoholic beverages for comfort during the colder season. And then also some people may use that as a coping skill to manage stress, to try to help go to sleep when you've got wonky daylight patterns. And it can also be, you know, an increase in alcohol if you are partaking in kind of those holiday drinks. So we do have a lot of kind of culture around celebrating the holidays with special traditional holiday drinks, and that can just mean for us that we're drinking more than we normally would. So for anyone who can't see, there is a really nice infographic here. It says heart attack warning signs, and this, I guess it's the same one, they combine them, but it's for men and women. Okay, but I broke the signs down on this slide for men. So we've got kind of mostly the ones that we always talk about. So squeezing feeling in the chest, like somebody maybe has your heart in their hand and they're squeezing on it. Pain in that left arm, cold sweat, chest pressure. So this could be kind of a chest pain. It could also be just feeling like there's an elephant sitting on your chest. Some difficulty breathing kind of things. And then that notorious pain that spreads to the neck, shoulder, and jaw. All right, now we're on the slide for women. It's the same infographic, and I can send it to Rebecca if any of you want it. As far as infographic goes, it's a pretty handout. It's in color, and it is helpful, especially if you volunteer somewhere, or maybe you're at higher risk or have a loved one that's at higher risk. It might be nice to have around the house or around the area that you're in so that people can have more information about what to look out for. So specifically for women, we have pretty much all of the same signs and symptoms as we do for men, but then there's a couple more that are very specific to females. So lower chest pain, it's not going to be as high up in the chest. Heart palpitations, so where you can just feel your heart kind of flip-flopping around in there. If you experience dizziness, and then unexplained fatigue or unexplained anxiety. Okay, so again, anytime we're looking at signs or symptoms, it needs to be a change in our normal functioning. If you have some sort of condition where you always kind of have some baseline fatigue, this needs to be different than that, or more than that somehow. And then some nausea, okay, feeling like you might be sick, shortness of breath or difficulty getting a full breath of air, chest pressure, and then specifically for women, back or jaw pain. And again, I have back pain like almost every day. The jaw pain would be unusual for me, but anytime we're looking at a symptom like this, we want to make sure it's different from what we normally experience. And then last but not least, pain that spreads to the neck, shoulder, and jaw. All right, so we are moving into the final phase of the PowerPoint where we're going to talk about how we get the most out of the winter time and while being safe. All right, many of you, if you've been to my talks, you've probably seen this slide a lot. The heart healthy diet, it's found basically if you cover the whole world, the best heart and brain healthy diet really comes down to how folks in Mediterranean areas eat. So this isn't like a fad diet. It's not for weight loss. If you subscribe to this diet very, very strictly, you will probably lose weight if you have any to lose, because it is a very clean way to eat. Really, really heart healthy. And then what we know about heart and brain health is that if you're eating heart smart, you're eating brain smart. And if you're eating brain smart, you're going to be eating heart smart. So if you make any kind of minor changes, if you notice on here, oh, there's already some things that I do, I would recommend pick another thing that you can start to focus on. You know, if you're eating maybe mostly not whole grains, like can you swap out, and instead of regular pasta, could you get whole grain pasta or whole grain bread? Instead of cooking with a lot of butter, could you switch that out and try to sub olive oil in between? Someone did bring up last time I ran this PowerPoint about cooking with olive oil and talking about smoke point. So if you are thinking about cooking and preparing meat and things like that on a stove or grill, you do want to be aware that olive oil smokes a lot differently, a lot more quickly, and so it won't work for all of your cooking needs. I usually try to, instead of using like a mainstream salad dressing, I'll try to prepare a salad dressing using a nice olive oil and then using some sort of vinegar or something on top of that, and then doing some herbs. So if you can use it in other ways, that just gives you some good omegas in there. So let's look at this diet a little more closely. There's a ton of vegetables involved with the Mediterranean diet. The only caveat to the vegetable piece is that not all vegetables are created equally. If you live with a metabolic disorder like diabetes, you probably know what I'm talking about. Sometimes people will be like, oh, I eat a ton of potatoes and I love peas and I eat a lot of corn. And I'm like, that is awesome, but all of those turn to glucose when you metabolize them. So long story short, it's a lot of sugar. It's a lot of starch. So vegetables, you want to make sure that you're eating a variety of them. And then if you can, try to limit those really high starch veggies. Even though things like potatoes, you know, you need to talk with your doctor if you're going to make dramatic diet changes, but potatoes have some vitamins and minerals that we can't find in a lot of other vegetables. So I don't mean to you know, trash on potatoes and corn and things like that. Just know that it's not going to be as nutritious and clean as something like the green leafy vegetables or things like that. There are fruits involved in the Mediterranean diet, and again, be thinking about it like strawberries have a very high sugar content, whereas blueberries have a lower sugar content. So you just want to make sure that you're trying to get a variety. There's a lot of legumes in the Mediterranean diet, whole grains, olive oil, fish, and poultry. So they don't do a lot of red meat. They eat very lean, clean meats. So I don't eat seafood, which is a shame, but I do try to limit the amount of red meat that I consume. I do notice it being a little bit harder for me to process. I can just kind of feel it versus, you know, a meat like chicken seems to be a little bit easier on my body. And again, we are all a little bit different in the foods that, you know, work well for our bodies. So if you want to make any dramatic changes or if you have questions, I would just urge you to make an appointment with your primary care doctor or see if you can get a referral to a nutritionist or someone who can work closely with you on how to change your diet to work best for your body. And last but not least, we have wine. They drink wine in the Mediterranean diet. Obviously in moderation, but there's some neat things that we can get from wine. And again, you know, just the caveat is that as we age, we don't break down wine or any kind of alcohol as efficiently as we do when we are younger. Our bodies change in that way. So, you know, if you've always had like, okay, I can have 2 small glasses of wine every night and I, you know, don't feel intoxicated and I don't get a hangover, whatever the case may be, just know that even if you've always had a certain amount and it's been fine, you may start to notice that you're becoming more sensitive to it, and that's to be expected. So you just want to be careful with that kind of stuff. If you're interested in the benefits that come from wine, it's actually from the outside, the skins of the grapes. And there are different ways to get those things rather than drinking wine. So I know Costco, pretty much everywhere I think I've seen it, is they'll have the resveratrol, I believe it's called, but it's basically the healthy components that you're seeing in the skin of the grapes. This next slide is talking about behavioral activation. So fancy way of saying you need to move your body, whether it's rainy and cold. I don't care if you go outdoors or not, okay? I do a lot of pacing in the winter times. I don't really like to get cold or rained on. But if you can walk indoors, or if you're a brave Oregonian and you can get some good water gear or snow gear, if we have that happen this year, and get all bundled up and just go take a quick walk. Some people will just have a plan where, like, especially because we're all stuck inside because of the pandemic, I made a pact with myself early on that when I would take a phone call, whether it was work or personal, if I was on my cell phone, I would be walking around my house. So for people who are, have really good ears, my mom would always get irritated because she could hear me pacing around. So I would try to stay on the carpeted floor. But that is a quick and easy way. And it becomes kind of mindless after a while. But it's a good way to get some extra steps in, some extra movement in while you're at the house. Another way is if you're going out to run some errands or anything like that, if you set a goal just to park a little bit further away from wherever you're going, squeeze in a couple extra steps that way. And then last but not least, we want to try to make it a goal to move or stretch at least every hour. And I am always surprised. My Fitbit hasn't been charged for a while, but if you use an activity tracker, an exercise tracker, or you have a smartphone or anything like that, even a tablet, you can do it. I mean, you could honestly use a microwave to set an alarm for yourself. But it's amazing to me how quickly an hour could go by when I'm on my computer or when I'm reading something, and all of a sudden my little, get up and move around reminder is coming on. I'm like, feels like it's only been 15 minutes, but it had been an hour and I hadn't moved at all. So we want to just make sure that we're getting as much movement for our bodies as we can each day, and just recognize that it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get some good movement in when our weather isn't playing nice. Get some Z's. This slide is all about sleep hygiene. Okay, so again, we need to honor the fact that daylight savings time and 4 p.m. total darkness does not make this easy for us. But when we are sleeping, there's a lot of repair happening. So it repairs heart and blood vessels, it tidies things up. It's really good for brain health as well, which helps the overall picture. So we need to make a focus on getting as much rest as we can. I always get a couple grumbles every year when I talk about this point, but it is true that for most human beings, we get the best sleep when we set the temperature somewhere in the 60s, okay? So it says 60 to 67 Fahrenheit for optimal sleep. I'm not saying that you don't have to wear cozy pajamas and flannel sheets and a nice comforter. It's just saying that in general, we don't sleep great when we're too warm, and that for most of our bodies, somewhere in that range is going to be optimal. I think 60 seems a little cold if you ask me, and I do like to sleep really cold. It also depends on what kind of sleep surface you're on. So if you have a foam bed, like the Tempur-Pedics, the memory foam beds, a foam bed in 60-degree room is going to be rock hard. Okay, so, and also that bed is going to sleep a lot warmer once it absorbs your body temperature and kind of comes up around you. If you're on a regular innerspring mattress, 67 degrees, 60 degrees, you can bundle up as much as you want and you're probably still going to be able to be comfortable. So just keep in mind, if you have a different type of sleep surface, how that could be impacted by turning the thermostat pretty cold. We also want to focus on not oversleeping. So being aware of that hibernation mode that sets in for a lot of us. We want to try to have anchors for when we wake up and an anchor for when we try to wind down and go to sleep every single day. That's one of the best things that you can do for yourself to ensure good quality sleep, is just trying to stay on some type of routine. Now, if you're a night owl or a morning person, those two different types of people can have completely different schedules, but you can still have a schedule nonetheless. So if you like to get up at 9 or 10 in the morning and not go to sleep until midnight, that's okay. Just try to be consistent with that. We all want to aim in general for about 7 to 9 hours. Most of us know, like I'm definitely a person, it takes me a long time to fall asleep. I'm a little bit restless. So for me to feel really good and rested, I usually do need closer to 9 hours. There are other people that have come up to me after my talks and said, look, I've never needed more than 4 or 5 hours of sleep and I always feel fine. And I'm like, well, please do not go try to lay down and get 3 more extra hours of sleep than you've ever needed in your life. So just trust that you know your body best. But sometimes people think that as they get older, older adults need less sleep, and that is not the case. Most of us, other than kiddos, we all need about 7 to 9. And then it is okay to supplement with naps if you're feeling tired in the middle of the day. So again, keep in mind what your sleep schedule is. We don't want to take a nap too closely to bedtime. And then we want to try to be intentional with naps. So if you can, you know, take a nap. If you're gonna take a nap, okay, 1 o'clock, I'm gonna take a nap. Please go in your bedroom, turn off the lights, get cozy, and take a nap. Maybe set an alarm for yourself so you don't sleep too long. Some people do well with a 15, 30-minute power nap. I wouldn't even be close to falling asleep at that point. So for me, about an hour is fine. Okay, we don't want to, most of us probably shouldn't be taking like 2 or 3 hour naps. We might get to the point in that nap where we're getting into a REM cycle, and waking up in the middle of something like that is going to make us feel not so good. So just try to find the sweet spot with a nap, and remember, just be intentional. And if you find yourself, I'm really tired, but it's, you know, 4 or 5 p.m. and I want to go to bed around 8 or 9, if you can push through that and keep yourself up and awake, then you will retain the ability to sleep a little bit better when you do go to bed. The other thing too is that I read a study a while ago that was talking about how our brain interprets being horizontal. So if you're a person that reads a lot during the day or watches TV a lot during the day or anything like that, maybe you're working on your laptop and you are laying down on the couch, okay? Your brain is interpreting that as rest, okay? So if you're like, I read a book for 6 hours today and now I can't sleep, you know? And you're like, I was active with my brain, what's going on? Well, some research is showing that the brain is kind of registering anytime we're laying down, even if we're awake and working really hard with our brains, it can interpret that as us getting rest. So if you read for 3 hours and then you find yourself, okay, I went to bed and I got up 4 or 5 hours later and I felt like it was ready to go, but it was, you know, 2 in the morning and you couldn't go back to sleep. That might be because cumulatively your brain already thought you had 3 hours. So it's like, it's been 7 to 8 hours, you're good to go. So be thinking of that. If you can try to transition some of your activities to an upright position and make yourself comfortable, it may not have such an impact on your sleep quality. All right, for anyone who can't see this slide, I feel bad for you because it's a really cute little reindeer. He's on his little yoga mat and he is trying to meditate. This slide is all about managing stress. So stress hormones are really harmful to our health, namely cortisol that happens when we are in stressful situations, whether it's low level, kind of everyday stress, or a really, really intensely stressful event that just comes up and then it's gone. It all kind of registers in our body as you know, also a physical stressor in some situations, but we want to work hard to manage the things that we're in control of. Okay, so either figuring out, can we change the situation? Can we eliminate the stressor? If not, because we can't control all the things that cause us stress, if not, how can we manage the stress that it causes us and take really good care of ourselves? So can we let it go? Can we talk to a therapist? Talk to someone at our church about it, kind of on an ongoing basis until it can resolve? Do we do extra exercise to help with that? What fits for you and what helps kind of manage that stress? Another important piece about stress relieving activities is that they really should be built into your daily schedule. They shouldn't be kind of that outlying optional thing. If I have time, you know, I'll go for a walk. If I have time, I will, you know, watch a YouTube video and do 15 minutes of stretching and yoga. If you say, if I have time or if I get around to it, then it's going to be more likely that you'll cut that activity and spend time doing other things. And I urge you year-round to make stress-relieving activities just as important as everything else. So we also need to focus on having as realistic of expectations as possible, especially during this time of year. If you came to my talk on managing expectations, dodging the holiday blues, it talks all about how we have a lot of control of the things that cause us stress because we have these expectations that we tote around really in any situation. So if you're interested in something like that, I think that talk has been recorded. You could watch that. But it really comes down to cognitive behavioral theory and how we can focus on changing the way that we're thinking. And I know that someone before this talk started mentioned that they had watched that holiday talk and they noticed that they were engaging in black and white thinking. And so if you notice that you are having some really inflexible thoughts, you can always pop online or you can email Rebecca and we can get you some resources on how you can start to modify the way that you're thinking so that you can decrease the amount of stress that you're actually bringing onto yourself incidentally from the ways that you are thinking and viewing your experience of life. Setting healthy boundaries can be really important, you know, throughout the year, but also around the holiday time. Okay, so everybody has a lot of needs. Everybody's kind of in a rush. The pandemic does not help our situation whatsoever. And so if people are just asking a lot of you and you're not able to, maybe they're not even asking a lot of you, but you just are exhausted and this year has been really hard and you just don't want to. Any of those reasons are fine reasons to say no. No, thank you. I'm sorry. Maybe next year. Or I can't do that, but here's what I can do. Okay, so setting healthy boundaries is a healthy part of being assertive. It is not being mean or selfish or anything like that. I would say that it's being the exact opposite. So you can always find information online too about how to set and maintain healthy boundaries with friends and family. And last but not least, deep breathing techniques are a great option to manage stress. So this can be helpful if you're feeling just kind of disconnected or stressed out, or you're not able to shut your brain down, you just really want to go to sleep. Doing any kind of deep breathing exercises, there's a lot of different ways to do it. They're also referred to as diaphragmatic breathing exercises. You can find them online, or I can get you a handout that will give you 4 different types of deep breathing techniques. It basically just resets your brain and your body from a stress response so that you can physically be more comfortable. And it also helps clear your mind and refocus your mind and get that back online. Because when we're in a stress state of mind, a lot of important parts of our brain kind of go offline because it's more focused on being safe. And so this is a way where you can kind of communicate to your brain like, yeah, we don't feel good, but we're safe. And then your brain says, okay, I'll start working again for you. So if you're interested in that, you can just let Rebecca know and we'll get you some handouts. This next slide is all about influenza. So on top of the coronavirus, we have flu season back again. Older adults are more vulnerable to the flu virus. It's most common in the fall and winter. It is highly contagious, and because it stresses our organs so much, it does cause an increased risk of cardiovascular events. If you're comfortable and able to get vaccinated, I would urge you to. It's not something that works really well every single year, but unless you're allergic to some component of the vaccination, it will not do you any harm. If anything, you might still get some strain of the flu that we didn't predict well, but you will also create a layer of protection. If you're around other people who are vulnerable, it can make it, less likely that they will contract something from you. And then, as always, and certainly during a pandemic, practicing good hand hygiene is one of the main ways that we can prevent getting the flu and spreading the flu. Prepping for strenuous activity. Okay, so if we do get snow or ice and you do have to go out, okay, or you got to clear your driveway or whatever the case is, if possible, put your pride aside, ask for help if it's available to you. If it's not available to you or you want to do it yourself, then you need to just check with your doctor if you can. Say like, hey, would it be safe for me to shovel snow? And if they say yes, it would, but make sure you only do 10 minutes at a time, come in and warm up, or do 15 minutes at a time, but then make sure you do something less strenuous for 5 minutes before you do another round of shoveling. So just check with them so that you know kind of where your limits are. We want to dress warmly. Obviously, layering up is really important. It's better to have more layers than you need. You can always take them off. Avoid having any alcohol prior because, again, it gives you that false sense of warmth. Avoid shoveling when you first wake up. My dad, it didn't matter what vehicle he ever drove, but he would always start the car or the truck, and we would sit there for like 2 minutes. He probably did clock it because he was a very precise person. But he wouldn't drive right after he turned on the engine. And he would be like, well, you got to let it warm up, right? It's better for the engine that way. This is the same situation with our hearts and doing something strenuous like shoveling. So when you first get up, you need to wait a little bit, walk around a little bit, get your blood pumping, and then you can go out and do something like shoveling. Take frequent breaks. Again, if you have devices that you can set alarms on, it's very easy to get in your zone and you're like, I just need to shovel one more section right before I stop. Don't try to be doing too many things or going too long. Please take frequent breaks. It's a pandemic. We've got all the time in the world. Know the signs of a heart attack. It could potentially help you get help for yourself or potentially help you get help for someone else. If you have the opportunity and any interest, learning CPR can be a really neat thing to have. Most people that know CPR don't ever have to use it in their whole lives, but I can tell you the people that I've run into that have used CPR and saved someone's life, we're pretty happy that they had that skill set. So if you're interested in that, you could probably learn how to do it online. I don't know how they're managing the in-person trainings, but you could learn the basics online. Otherwise, if like Samaritan usually provides some CPR community classes, things like that, if they're doing that socially distanced, that's something that it's usually a low cost, or they might even provide it free or on scholarship for community members. Avoid alcohol. So again, I'm not your mom, you're an adult. You get to make your own choices, but remember that alcohol makes you feel warmer than you really are, which makes it more difficult to know when we need to warm up. Know your limits and stick to them. Again, just honor the fact that as we get older, our bodies are not going to process alcohol as well as we used to. And staying hydrated is really important for staying warm because our bodies are comprised so much of water, and so alcohol dehydrates us. The other thing to know is that, if you're using this as a nightcap kind of thing, all the science shows that it may help you fall asleep initially, but because it's dehydrating, it's going to actually wake you up earlier than it would, or it makes us have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and so that will disrupt your sleep too. For everyone who can see this slide, you're welcome. For anyone who cannot see this slide, it features a woman wearing a nose warmer, not a face warmer, not earmuffs, just a nose warmer. It is a crocheted little panda over her nose, and this looks less funny now a year into a pandemic because it looks an awful lot like a face mask, only it's not covering her mouth. I challenge any crocheters, if you ever decide that you want to take on this challenge, I will wear one of these for you. But we want to dress for success when it's cold out. Body heat loss is directly correlated to how much skin we have exposed. So thinking about all of our cute accessories that we can layer on, every little extra piece can make a difference. We want to wear multiple layers. If you've got a base layer, again, my dad has passed away, so he won't get mad at me for using him as a reference on this, but he always swore by pantyhose as his base layer. And he, I don't think he'd be upset if I was telling everybody this, but if you got pantyhose, if you've got those kind of more compression leggings, anything like that, that is a tighter layer that you can put on underneath a bigger layer, that will definitely help insulate you against the cold. Staying dry is really, really important for staying warm. Adding on hats, scarves, gloves, and heavy socks is a great way to stay warm. And last but not least, remember to have fun. Okay, so fun is a big part of being healthy and being well. So we just have to figure out how we can adapt no matter what kind of weather or coronavirus or anything in this year can throw at us. If we get some snow, it would be fun to play in the snow as long as you're all bundled up and safe. And here's a little comic for you from the far side. And we are finished with the slideshow, and I can take any